So I'm going to talk about my favorite cheat, this time on my laptop setup. So I'm starting a new patch, and I'll keep it pretty simple. And I'm just going to use the Surrealistic MG1 as the synthesizer because it's easy. And then I'm going to drop in voltage modular as an effect. That'll take it a minute to load. The other plugins will load pretty fast. I'm going to add some delay. And I'll add some black hole reverb. Okay, so I'm going to do my routing first. So I need to add my MIDI input to both the instrument, and it's going to go to the modular filter. So it's just an effects patch. So all the voltage modular is doing here is I'm going to load up whatever filter that I want to use for breath control. In the original synthesizer, I'm going to have the filter be completely open. So I need to connect the output of the first plugin to voltage modular. I mean, basically, I'm using the live host here like it's a modular setup because everything is chained. So we have the plugin chain all set up. Now, MG1 is going to come up and my patch is already going to have breath control, but I'll just unmap that real quick. Where are we at? Okay. So right now, you can see the filter opening and closing on the MG1. You're not hearing any sound because it's going into voltage modular, which has nothing loaded up. So I'm going to unconnect MIDI from this, and I'm opening it all the way. So I'm going to drop in the ladder filter. So I actually have the standard filter off to the side. It's not connected. So what's happening, the input that's going to be coming from MG1 is going to here it is. It's going into the ladder filter, and then the output's going out to the main output, and then this should have breath mapped already. And now you hear the sound because this filter is opening and closing, allowing the sound. So now I have okay, that's a bit much with all the effects. Let me fix that. I'll definitely shorten this. And black hole always comes up really high, and I always pot it way down. It's like a little bit of a halo from it. So here's the MG1 without the second filter. So you have the nice bright solid without any filtering. But if we and you might be thinking, okay, but MG1 already has a ladder filter. That's true, but then I can just switch the connections to the other filter. And it sounds like a completely different synthesizer. That's 12 dB. Now I can switch it to 24. I think this filter sounds more like the 7 filter, so it's kind of the smooth, really nice kind of timbre that you might use for ballad playing or something melodic. Can get a nice horn-like effect out of this. So I noticed I have the scaling on here where the filter doesn't actually completely close. Let me get the MIDI. Where's the MIDI at? So that's got to be this one. So it's already starting at 20%, so you can adjust it. And that's where I really scale the definition on the attack when I'm using breath control. Then if you want to go back to the Mogi sounding one, which again is very similar to how MG1 would sound anyway, but the resonance really gives it a twang to the sound. So without the resonance, I mean, they sound kind of similar, but when you crank up the resonance on the ladder filter, it really adds a lot of character to the sound. And a lot of times I will map breath to both the filter and or the frequency and the resonance. Although it actually works quite well without doing it that way, because then you can leave the resonance unmapped to MIDI and manually adjust it when you're playing. So that's where you can easily switch it from being like the more soft lead. Oops. I unmapped everything. And then depending on how much you're opening and closing the frequency makes a big difference when you have the resonance turned up. So like the typical kind of soft lead that I do would probably be more like this, where you don't open the frequency too much and it only has a little resonance to help with the attack. And then I often set up what I would call like a reso lead or whatever, which has almost cat-like right in that neighborhood, so you get the you've heard that in a lot of pieces. That sound, really typical Moog synthesizer timbre that everyone uses. I don't know. I don't think anything that I'm doing with a virtual analog is particularly unique. I think what makes it unique is the fact that when you use breath to modulate the filter, it's like putting your DNA fingerprint into the sound, and no two people really use the breath the same way, which is why it's interesting. I find that everybody playing wind controller sounds a little different, and that to me is the main explanation. Is just the way people use breath differently, the way we use articulation differently, just different sensibilities about sound in general. Everyone sounds kind of different and personal, and I think, the great keyboard synthesizer players certainly did that, all of them, because they knew how to get all the nuance out of the instrument, whether it was through the keyboard itself or by manipulating the controls live while they played, like with the left hand adjusting the filter settings while they're soloing and all that, like George Duke or whoever, Jan Hammer, they all did it, Herbie Hancock, everybody, Chick Corea, etc., etc., etc. And I think with breath, it's just a nice way to be able to do that organically. Where the breath can do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it can go to multiple destinations, and you can invert them. You don't have to just do them from 0 to 100. You can do all kinds of things. And, the more that you're able to use breath to modulate the sound, the more unique it becomes, where it just doesn't sound like it could be anything else. I mean, even these sounds that I'm doing, which are really quite simple patches, I think, by using breath the way that we would use it, you can go from staccato to, slow filter sweeps to, very legato ballad playing without really changing anything. You don't have to touch any dials. Or maybe I tweak the resonance a little when I'm soloing, and I usually mess around with the effects more. That's kind of where I get into, like a lot of times I have the overdrive effect in the chain right after the filter, and then, I'll play without the overdrive and then kick it in, if I want to, get a more guitar-like basically sound out of it. But I'll demonstrate the different ways you can shape the notes with breath, and that's really what you're doing, because essentially I'm not using any kind of real envelope when I'm doing this. You basically, the oscillator can go into a gate on and off, and then you use the filter to contour the shape of the sound, and the filter is going to do everything, because your breath, just like if you were playing a real actual acoustic wind instrument, your breath is doing everything. So I'm going to demonstrate one of my favorite tricks, which is to take a synthesizer plugin and run it through a second filter. And what we can do here is add breath control to plugins that maybe don't have good breath control. Now I'm using Mood, which actually does have nice breath control if you access it directly using a program like MIDI Flow. So I'm launching it. I'm going to pull up a fairly bright lead sound that I like. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to find the individual effects levels and I'm going to turn those down. And I'm also going to adjust the internal filter of the plugin because I'm adding a second filter. I would typically run the filter of the main plugin wide open with no resonance, but you can change that. It doesn't have to be that way at all, because really the second filter is going to become the one that shapes or contours the sound. It took me a second to remember where the effects were in Mood. I haven't done any patch programming in Mood for a while. I have a whole bunch of presets that I set up for myself for breath already. And standardly when I'm using, so that's the reverb, when I'm using Mood, what I do is that I send the MIDI input directly into MIDI Flow and bounce that into Mood, and then I scale it and set it up that way. And Mood is actually a good synthesizer because you can save the MIDI control routing at the patch level. So now I've added the Blamsoft F16 filter, and then I'm also going to drop in some general effects because you turn the effects of the synthesizer plugin off, so you need to add external effects after the second filter. Otherwise the filters can open and close, with the delay or reverb getting closed down at the same time, which is an interesting effect. I use that sometimes too. So here's the filter. It's not mapped yet. You can do 2-pole, 4-pole, 3-pole. It's a ladder filter. And you can map breath to the frequency, you can map it to the resonance, you can map it to the saturation. I'm just using the frequency here. So I'm blowing before I do MIDI learn to make sure that it picks up CCO2 and not the note numbers. And it's mapped now. You can adjust the percentage of breath so that if you want to have more definition on the attack, you don't start it right at 0. And then here you go. And the 2 poles obviously brighter. Now there's a nice control panel. You can easily modulate or adjust the settings on the filter. I like this delay for the same reason. It works good for live performance. F16 is actually quite a nice sounding filter, and it's very useful because you can take, any plug-in, especially something like Poison, for example, that has kind of a zippy filter, and then you can use F16 to get smooth breath response because the F16 filter